Welcome to our Thursday Night Live. I'm Kendra, if you're new here, Plowman's Backyard, and this is Pam from Hidden Blessings Homestead. And today we're going to talk about canning. We've had a lot of people ask us how to can or if we can show them how to can, and we thought, why do it individually when we can just kind of put it out here for everyone to see and just go over some of the basic questions that people have with canning, and maybe cover some fears if you have fears, and just kind of our own personal experiences with canning. I guess
I actually had a question today that I didn't know the answer to. So, because I have never canned with brown sugar.
Okay.
And so I'm like, is that going to be a difference than white sugar in recipes because it has the molasses and stuff? And I looked it up and it says it's fine. So, you know, but you get questions and sometimes it's something you've never really dealt with before. I've never really made, they were wanting to make a fruit syrup with brown sugar instead of white sugar. And so
I've never canned with brown sugar. So, it's a good question. And we're hoping you guys will have some questions for us. But I thought we would start off just by talking about maybe our first experiences canning. And I think for me, I started canning. The first thing I canned was spaghetti sauce. And I didn't have a clue of what I was doing, or I didn't have a clue of any fear. So it was a bit weird. But my mother-in-law actually went through doing spaghetti sauce with me. And that was the very first experience that I had. And we did can spaghetti sauce, and there was some vegetables and things in it, and we water bath canned it. But I didn't know better, and I don't know that she knew better, but we lived. I don't recommend doing it, but you know, so there's a lot of times when, you know, you might just be starting out, you might not know what you're doing. We all started somewhere. So don't feel bad if you're new to canning and you really don't know where to start. If I had to say something or suggest something to start canning, I think I would start you out with applesauce. It's probably one of the easier ones, or something fruit-based, pears or something.
Jams aren't too bad either, although, I mean, you might get different consistencies or something, but it's not going to be too hard on you. Applesauce is good.
Applesauce,
or even like good. Fruits that are like whole, you know, where you're just peeling like pears and stuff and canning them. That's not too bad either.
Making syrup.
So I was the opposite end of the spectrum. I came into it with lots of fears, and I was like, by the book. By the book.
By the book.
So I grew up, my mom canned, but she never taught me canning because she had a bad experience when I was young. And it was to do with oven canning. So I do not advocate oven canning at all, but she had some jars she took out of the oven, and they were really hot. And they tapped, and she turned. I'm really thankful to the Lord for that. My dad called her at that moment, and she turned, and so she got burned on her back, and she had some glass. So I came into it with lots of fears.
Oh yeah, you would.
And being really careful and really prayerful when I can. But I have learned over the years that it is very safe if you follow, you know, recommendations. So I would not. Since then, I actually did at one point oven can. Somebody convinced me to, years and years later. But I actually it was like, safety wise, it was fine, but I actually had mold in the jars, and they were high acid.
What?
So I was actually a little bit confused by that because they were sealed and there was mold in the jar. So,
wow.
Anyways, I'm not, some people oven can, but I don't advocate it. But I came into it from that side of things. So I sterilized my jars, I heated my lids, I was very careful with processing times, and, you know, being really careful when I put my jars down that there was, you know, a towel, and that I wasn't tapping the jars, everything. I tried to do everything really carefully, and did that for years, and then gained some confidence, and then also realized that recommendations had changed. The book I was given, I was thankful to be given this book when I was starting out, because that's all I had. I didn't have anybody to show me. I was living up here on my own at a distance from my mom, and I'm not sure she would have shown me anyways, because she was always afraid to can around other people after her experience, but she still cans. but yeah, I used that book, and I read it, and I did it, and it wasn't so bad. You know, you do it more and more, and so now I realize that if you follow rules, that canning is perfectly safe.
Oh yes,
perfectly safe. So, yeah,
I think maybe we could get into a little bit. A lot of people have a fear that, you know, the actual canners are going to explode or the jars are going to explode. I think now with all the new gadgets that they have on canners, they make it pretty secure that that's not going to happen.
Yes. Yeah. The things have come a long way, And I've had a jar break maybe in a canner, but not explode. It just like, it was probably a cracked jar to begin with, you know, and that's one thing you do want to check is, you know, you should check that your jars, you know, they don't have chips or cracks. And I maybe wasn't being very careful that time, or maybe, you know, the jar in the canner fell over. I don't know. Maybe I didn't have the right amount of jars in. It was years ago, but it wasn't an explosion or anything. Mm-hmm. It literally just broke, you know, in the canner, and it was fine. And my other jars were fine. So, yeah. Now, over the years, rules have changed. You know, they used to say you had to sterilize your jars all the time. And now they've come out and said that because we're canning things for 10 minutes or longer, that we're sterilizing the jars during the process. So that's not really an issue anymore. It used to be more an issue when people would can things for 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you know, 8 minutes, whatever. I sterilize my jars if I'm doing juice or things like that. And I can it afterwards. I never used to. I used to just sterilize the jar, put the steam from the steam juicer in the jar, let it seal, and it's fine for a while that way, but it lasts, and the quality lasts a whole lot longer if you can it after. So I mean, you're putting the time in. I know. You're putting ingredients in, sometimes organic ingredients in. Why not?
Yeah, it's worth doing.
Why
the
not
extra
do those
just to
extra
be sure.
few minutes? You know.
Yeah. You put a lot of effort into it, so
exactly.
Why? Yeah,
exactly.
I agree.
The more recent, and so actually, a friend of mine had told me that about the 10-minute, the not sterilizing the jars because of the 10 minutes. A more recent thing is now they're saying that you don't need to heat the lids. So that's a bit more recent. I went on Ball's website, and also I think it's on one of the national canning websites or somewhere else. I think we have a snapshot of that, but
just a photo.
Screenshot. But we can maybe,
we can let Jason.
We'll keep going and Jay will find it. But so now they're just saying just use them, like wash them.
There it is there.
Oh, there. Okay.
Yeah. So now they're just suggesting that you wash them with soapy water and set them aside, just like the jars. They say they actually work better at room temperature than if they were heated. So it's good to know.
Because I've always heated my lids. So
I used to heat my lids and my rings and my jars were sterilized and, you know, do all that stuff. So, but you know, any extra step that we don't have to do, I'm good with that. Life is busy enough.
Is it up there now?
So,
yeah. Okay. So there is.
So just wash them with water and that's it.
And this comes from the Ball website itself?
This is a different one, I think. And then there's a direct quote from Ball. This is one that's, I think, kind of quoting, like going by that. But they actually say that they could buckle and various other things. So it could actually cause problems. I never had it cause problems, but I do know that some of my jar lids didn't always seal. And now I have pretty much 100%.
Oh, wow.
The only time I didn't have 100% was with these.
Okay.
With these, the Snap Tight.
From the dollar store.
From the dollar store. So I had one buckle of these, and I've had where the seals weren't really strong with those, but I get these from the dollar store, no problem. Use them for years, store them.
Yeah.
For years, and they work just fine.
Oh yeah, we always get those too from the dollar store. They're Much cheaper.
So to be completely honest, this is not what's recommended, but I just open the box and use them. I don't wash them, but they recommend you wash them. So
I do. Okay.
I'm just letting you know that I've done that and been perfectly
You've
fine
been perfectly
every time.
safe. Well, that's good. It's good to know.
Anyways, so yeah.
Yeah. So I think, let's see. So maybe we could cover like some of the acidity and how to know when to water bath can and when to pressure can. So basically anything that is low acid, you would
Pressure
water
can.
that. I knew I was going to say the wrong one. Got so much going on in my head. See, this is why you're around. Yeah, so low acid is pressure canned and high acid. So high acid would be your fruits and things like that, and your low acid would be like your vegetables and other things. So that's how you would know which method to use if you were doing canning.
I was hoping my book had charts, but I'm not sure that it does. I know online there's lots of charts for the exact acidity of foods, and tomatoes are like the borderline.
Yeah. So tomatoes, like we were talking earlier, in tomatoes, I always add lemon juice to it.
So do I.
So
just to be safe.
sorry to interrupt. They didn't actually see the thing, so I'm just going to redo this.
Okay.
Sorry.
Sure. That's why he's here helping us.
Helping us out.
We need the tech guy.
I'm hoping they see that.
All they have to do is look up ball, though,
Yeah.
and heating jar lids, and you'll see that they've corrected that. So, yeah, they say they actually work better now. So I don't know if it's something they didn't realize or if they've changed the way they make them, but something more recent.
I almost prefer to like go out and buy these. Like I don't know, but when I buy my jars, I find that a lot of them have
scratches,
like
and dings
and stuff
yes.
on them, and I'm like,
I agree.
Here I am. I'm like, I'm buying the jars new, and I'm throwing out the lids.
So I agree. I've actually, you definitely want to wash your jars. That's one thing I have to say. So I've had an experience where I had brand new jars sealed from the thing, opened it up, and there was like what looked like mold on the inside.
Oh my.
So wash your jars before, even if they're brand new. But yes, I completely agree.
Yeah.
I have had a lot, like my habit. So if I was canning and I had brand new jars, I would take the lids off and I would put them in a bowl, right? And then I would wash my jars and my lids would be set aside.
Mm-hmm.
And then I carefully go through the lids and check, because I've had scratch lids, ding lids, all kinds of things from the brand new jars.
Yeah.
Whereas you're right, these are fine.
I
Most
know.
of the time. You
I
do
don't
have to
know.
look still. I still would suggest looking,
Yeah,
because
maybe
they could sometimes
once in a
have,
while, but
far
I guarantee if you're buying like a case of them, you're gonna have like 3 is gonna be thrown out, maybe more.
Isn't that?
It's so I don't know why, but it always happens.
And so I do sometimes. I know that like they say they recommend you use new lids every time, and that is good practice. That is good practice. I have reused lids, but I am very careful to look at them. So if I'm going to reuse a lid, I'm going to see that lid looks like it's brand new. And, no scratches, no dings, no things that you would get with sometimes brand new jars. So that's a very good point.
There's someone that's wondering about, can I post a link? Do you have the link to the ball information?
I can get it.
The information.
But it's from their website.
My internet might not be so great. There was a screenshot, but I don't know.
For that one.
Yeah, there was a screenshot, but here we go. So Michigan State said it. Let me see where else.
University.
Yeah, Michigan State University. Let me see if ball. There we go. Ball mason jars. Simply wash lids. Yep, right here. So how do I share that?
Ballmasonjars.com.
And it's under water bath canning. So it says simply wash lids in hot soapy water, dry and set aside until needed.
Okay, so I'll share that link then, and they can view it from there.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, because I've always heated mine, but
Yeah,
I mean,
did
it
it
makes
for
sense,
years.
especially if you're pressure canning. That I mean,
So what I didn't like about heating mine in water was that if they're sitting too long, longer than you thought they were going to, then you can start to get where I found anyways, maybe it was just me, but I would get like rust in the pot and stuff like that. And I thought, well, that can't be real good for the jar lids. I was probably beginning, and so I was probably taking longer than the average person to can things, trying to be really careful. But yeah, I did have that sometimes where they just seemed like towards the end and the bottom, I'm like, oh, that's probably not so good to be adding to my jars.
true.
So
Yeah.
this way you avoid all that.
Another really good resource that I really like using is the National Center for Home Preservation. So I can get Jason when he's ready to send that link for just to kind of put it in the chat there for you guys. I have it up there in one of the tabs, but it basically tells you what methods to use, altitudes to use. It has recipes there.
Pretty much, if you're going to buy the ball books or if you're buying these books, they got them from there.
That
more
website.
Than likely.
Yeah. It's a really good resource. I use it all the time. So if you're looking for a good place to get those resources, that's where I'd recommend going.
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah.
There are lots of good. The other thing I find is you have to be careful buying books, especially as a beginner canner. There's a lot of books out there that are just written based on people's, it might have been grandma's recipes. It might have been their own recipes. And with high acid foods, that's not such a danger. You want to combine 3 different fruits in a jar instead of one, stuff like that. High acid, as long as you're staying high acid, not such a big deal. But when you start to get to low acid foods and pressure canning, that becomes a problem, because just changing the amount of ingredient could change everything.
Yeah.
The safety of it. So when, I guess we'll do hot water bathing and then we'll move out to pressure canning probably. So let's see what else. Oh, I got one of these.
That's a good tool to have too, if you don't.
And I wanted to show it. So this, I think I got this from PV Mart for $2, maybe something like that. You can get them on Amazon too, but I think PV Mart was actually cheaper. And it shows you your headspace. Yeah, you can see the jar. Okay. So this is 1 inch, 3/4 inch, 1/2 inch, and 1/4 inch. And you just kind of, your ingredients want to, meet up to that. And it makes it really easy to do headspace. Before, I used to look in my book and there's a page that shows an example of headspace, but I found it a little bit more confusing because they use the rings, and as the rings turn, they kind of change level. Yeah. So, you could get a little confusion. Yeah. But so I like that. And the other thing it's good for is when I'm closing my All-American canner, it's like the perfect gap. Okay. So it makes it easy to close it.
Oh, good.
So that's that.
Now, what's the purpose for having a headspace?
I haven't wrapped my head around why the different headspaces completely. So I know with pressure canning, it tends to be about 1 inch. I have to be honest that when I see a recipe that calls for a 1/4 inch headspace, I tend to go closer to 1/2 inch headspace because I've had siphoning and stuff like that. So I don't tend to do 1/4 inch very often. It's 1/2 inch or 1 inch. The less air you have in the jar, the thing is, the less air you have in the jar, the better, right? And so you don't want air in your jar after you've canned something. But then if you get too close to the top, certain things are going to siphon.
Yeah.
So
I've had that happen
it's a balance.
before.
And with pressure canning, I think that's much more of a danger when you go up with your headspace. I think that's why most things are around 1 inch.
Now I know like up here we're around the 1300 kind of altitude. So we have to can at a higher temperature, higher PSI. Now would that affect the headspace? Like would that cause more siphoning than somebody who is at a lower
So pressure
altitude?
canning, I think it does make us have more siphoning.
Yeah.
Because we are 15 pounds
of pressure. Yes.
So when we should only be, 11, 12 maybe. I think it's the average gauge. If it's a 10-pound weight, I believe the gauge should be 11 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
So we would probably be 12. I know at 5,000 feet, I know watch somebody who cans at 5,000 feet and they're only 13 pounds of pressure. So when we're canning at 15 pounds of pressure, we are overdoing things. But unfortunately in Canada, we don't have extensions where you can test them. So I was recently looking into that, and apparently you can ship them off and they will check them for you and ship them back. But they say for Canada, that's just not really, they do it, but it's not very realistic.
Mm-hmm.
I was tempted. I'm like, I wonder if you could drive across the border. We're not that far, You could drive across the border and have them.
So I know with my Presto canner, I've got the dial, and then I've got the dial gauge, and it came with this weight. And so I told them like we're in Canada and I couldn't get the dial tested, and they actually mailed us this for free so that we can do a weighted gauge instead. So if you have a Presto canner, definitely go and contact them to see if you can get the weighted gauge.
Yes, you definitely want to do that, because I didn't know that and I had to buy one. I just paid it out of my own pocket. But I had somebody recently that I was advising to buy one, and I told them, they asked about that, and I said, no, I know somebody who's contacted them and had one sent for free. So don't buy one. But I feel like it's a disadvantage for us here in Canada, because I'll give you an example. I have never been able to do pressure can corn without having it caramelize. And I really, one of the things they say about why is overpressure. And I'm like, I'm canning at 15 PSI. So I wish. Those are one of the downsides of living in Canada. There's so many positives though.
Yeah, there is.
But it's better to be safe, and we wouldn't want to go under. So I wouldn't want to always be thinking that my food wasn't safe and walking that line. So
it's true.
It is nice because you don't have to watch it as much. I always stay close to my pressure canner, but you don't have to watch the gauge and make sure you can listen for the gauge.
So there's a viewer that's asking, what's the headspace for pear sauce?
For pear sauce, I just happen to love doing pear sauce. All right, this recipe. Watch it not say.
It might not say. It should.
It doesn't say. We can look it up. I would assume it's the same as applesauce. I want to say I do 1/2 inch, but I will check. I think I do 1/2 inch. And that's one thing, is I do find that even though I do the same things for years on end, you're doing a lot of different things and you get things mixed up. So
yep, it's true. I always go back.
You always go back and check.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you've ever heard of Creative's candy.
1/2 inch.
They mentioned.
Yeah. So there you go. I tend to, most things are 1/2 inch.
Yeah. A lot.
Unless it says 1 inch.
And then me and you Acres, welcome there to the live.
Yes, welcome.
They were just saying that perhaps the spacing could be off-gassing of food.
I think, okay, so one important point that comes to mind is it's also like expansion of the food.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because some foods expand more than others, and they're taking that into consideration as well. So beans, like lima beans especially, And I'm trying to think of what the other, there was like 3 at least that they expand. Corn, I think, was one of them. Anyways, they expand in the process of canning, which is another reason you have to be careful. There's a lot of like non-soak dry canning bean vlogs and
I've never
videos
done
out
that.
there. And one thing you have to be careful with that, other things aside, but one thing is that different beans expand different amounts. So there was actually one YouTuber that did experiment on that. And some things expanded a lot, some things didn't, but you could actually make your jars crack and break in the canning process. So that wouldn't be fun.
No. Perfect. So, thank you for that.
Thank you for that.
We can maybe show them the difference between, what do you think?
Yeah, we could do that. The All-American and the...
So Pam here has the All-American. Maybe you can tell us what you like and don't like about it.
Yeah. So I have 3 different canners, actually. I've been given a couple over the years and stuff. And this was my big purchase one. And I'm happy to have it, but there is some drawbacks. So it's huge, number 1. But number 2, it's really heavy. So
extremely,
I've been asked recently to help some people can. And knowing the person, I said, you know, is weight a problem? Because they're really heavy, you know, really heavy, even empty. And so I actually told her that she would much prefer a canner like yours.
And I have the Presto, thanks to Angie.
And it is super light.
It is so light.
So, I mean, if you think about how heavy that was for me, empty, and then what if you stack a few layers of jars in there or something, right? So, I mean, you have to consider things like that. What I love about it is that I no longer need a gasket, so I don't have to worry about that. It just is metal on metal. So let me turn it towards the camera that way. So to do it up, so it's quite heavy and extensive.
It's solid.
It is very solid. This thing's very solid. But there is no gasket to replace. On the other hand, it does mean that you need to lubricate it with something.
Some sort of oil.
At least every couple uses. I don't know that I do it every time.
It's a little dirty there.
But
anyways, my dirty lid here. But you can see mine's got a gasket here that needs
removable.
To be replaced. And
so with this, when I'm putting it back on, it's a little bit more fussy. Let me see if I got the right spot even. Yep, I think so. Trying to think. I took it off this way. I think I did. Okay. So it's a little more fussy. You have to make sure you have everything lined up. And then you have to make sure the space before you start tightening down, because it can shift a bit. So you want your space to be even all the way around. And thanks to the needy homesteader, she showed that she used her Pokey Joe, as she calls it. So the headspace tool makes like the perfect, so you just kind of go around the whole thing beforehand and make sure that that fits in. And then you can start putting it back on top. And you have to do opposite sides. And then you want to do opposite sides again. And you don't tighten them all the way down at first, and then you go tighter. Kind of like putting a tire. And there you go, right? But it is a little more fiddly. You're not just putting it on and turning it. And I have had it seize. I have had where the lid wouldn't come off after I was done canning. And so I had a little panic moment. And my son and my husband came to the rescue, and we carefully just pried at a couple different locations, and it came right open. So it's not a big deal if it does do that. You just carefully open it up. But Otherwise, both of ours have the dial gauge as well as a weighted gauge, I think.
Yep.
With my Miro, it's just the weighted gauge, no dial gauge. I like having both. I like being able to see.
Yeah.
It's especially good, I think, when you're getting used to your jiggles. Jiggles are funny. You know, that was my
all
most
different.
That was my most intimidating thing about pressure canning was I'm trying to think which one it was. I think it was these ones. I will show you. I think it's for my Miro.
Oh, yes.
I think it was these guys. And they don't jiggle. They spin. And so I'm like, it's not jiggling. It's not jiggling. This was years ago. And I got the Miro as a gift. And it came with no instructions. So, yeah. So I'm like, what does a jiggle look like? I kept hearing all these things about jiggles. So what I ended up doing was I ended up purchasing one of these, and they do jiggle.
Okay.
So, and then I think these ones jiggle too. Right?
They do.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, raw.
I've got an assortment over the years from different canners, but that was intimidating. Like, how many times? What does a jiggle sound like?
Yeah.
Is it too jiggly? Is it not jiggly enough? You know? And then as you start to go, like, I remember my son saying, it's common sense, Mom. If it's still jiggling at all during that minute, then it's up to pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, okay. And the problem with it jiggling too much is more that you're letting out, well, you can over process, especially at 15 pounds.
Yeah, you can.
But the other problem with it is you're losing a lot more water in steam. So you don't want to, if you had something that you were processing for an hour and a half, you wouldn't want to lose all your water and have it boil dry. So that's why you kind of want to have only so many jiggles a minute. You want to know it's still at pressure and allowing pressure out, but you also don't want it to be over.
So we have a viewer that's actually asking, what is a jiggle?
I wish we could show a jiggle. That would take
a long time. You'd be here for a while. I'm not going to show you what a jiggle is, but it's hard to. So I know mine, it would kind of rock like this, I guess. And at some point it would go like really, really fast, and other times it would go slow.
And with these, it would kind of go. Psh.
Yeah, so that's very different from like when I have this on the Presto. It's basically just rocking back and forth. So like she said, if you have it too high and too much pressure or water's being released, it's going to go really, really fast. And you can hear it too. It's not just seeing it.
Yeah.
You'll hear the sound of the steam.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I was doing beans a while back, and it was getting to me after a while. I was like an hour and a half of psh. It was so rhythmic, I could predict it by the time I was done. But that's kind of where you want it at. You want it to be rhythmic. You want it to stay the same. You want to be really careful lowering your temperature, that you're really just doing it incrementally, because if you go too low, you have to start your time again if it doesn't have the pressure anymore. So
and we also have another question. Does the canners come with a jiggle?
Yes. Well,
mine did not.
Yeah, I shouldn't say all of them do.
So maybe. So my Presto, like, it comes with the dial gauge, and then it came with this. This thing didn't jiggle. It just kind of sat there unless I went like very high, which happened once, and it started to move. But this thing, you don't need to go, like, you can just do our 15 pounds of pressure, and it was jiggling just fine.
Maybe we should show them how you do different. With this one, it comes, how does it come apart? It's been a while. It lifts off, does it not?
Oh, yeah.
For the different weights. There you go. She knows what she's doing.
Sometimes I don't.
So it would be 5, 10, 15. So to have 15, you have to have all 3 on. Now with mine, the first one I got had different ones. It actually had 3. I don't know where the third one went. But and then with the one I bought that I like, and I think this one came with one of these as well. Anyways, it you just turn it. So it's 5, 10, and 15.
That's
and
different.
basically for us, almost everything's 15.
Everything is 15.
It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
But it is what it is. I'm sorry that we couldn't show you the jiggle, because that really is so important, but it takes a really long time to get up to pressure. I mean, you have to, it's what, about 20 minutes to get it, and you got to go 10 minutes venting, then you put it on, then you got to wait for it to get up to pressure.
Yeah, it's not a
like
small
half-hour
process.
commitment to get it to jiggle.
At least a half hour. Like probably what, like 40 to an hour to bring it all down afterward. After you're done your processing.
I did beans and dried beans, and it was a 3-hour round trip. So, you know, keep that in mind. You know, plan earlier in your day. It's not something you want to do tired. I read a story the other day of a guy who got tired, fell asleep.
Oh, that's one thing.
Came really close to having a problem
with, like, when you're canning. Like, canning deserves 100% of your attention. So you don't want to have anything, you know, distracting you. If you have something else going on, someone stopping by, it happens. But I never leave my kitchen when the canner's going.
So I have to tell you about it, and it happens. I can sometimes on a wood cook stove, which is much more difficult to regulate. And I had planned, I was actually doing a video. I was going to do a video. It didn't happen after what happened. But I was doing corn for a second time, but this time instead of on the propane stove, I was doing it on the wood cook stove. And I had neighbors stop by. I really love my neighbors that stopped by. But it was a distraction. So my son is old enough, you know, he's helped with canning and stuff like that before. So I left him in charge of it. And I went outside, and I took longer than I thought. And he knew he was supposed to regulate the temperature. He panicked because it was actually like levitating. So he was getting really high in pressure. And now thinking back, that's really scary for me. But anyways, he eventually just put it up and gave up, you know, and which is the right thing to do. That was the right thing to do, because he was having such a hard time regulating the temperature. It would go up and then it wouldn't jiggle. And then he was like, it was all over the place for the poor kid. It's a roller coaster ride. He did a great job. He did the right thing, you know, just terminate.
Wow.
But yeah.
So how different, because Pam lives off grid, how different is it? Like, how do you keep, I guess, a steady temperature for
So water bath canning is not such a challenge. I've water bath canned plenty on the wood cook stove, and that's not really a big deal. The biggest challenge comes, like, I use a really big Amish canner on my wood cook stove, and I love it. By the way, if you're going to get one, what is that store called in Elmira, Drayton area? Anyways, maybe we'll put a link afterwards or something.
I think I have the book here.
What is it called? Living Waters.
Yes, Living Waters.
Living Waters. Good price.
Oh, yeah.
I've seen them some places, I'm not going to mention where, for $900. That's ridiculous. So Living Waters, I think it's around $250 Canadian, if I'm not wrong. But it's in that range. And in the States, I think you can get it for around $230, something like that. So don't pay more for that. But I love it because you can do so much in it. I have multiple layers, and I can do, I want to say 15 to 18 pints in it for sure.
Wow. It's large.
And then that's one layer, so you can keep going. So I've hot water bathed in that plenty on the wood cook stove. The challenge for something that big is to turn the heat off, because there's no burner to turn off at the end, right? Sense. And it's too heavy and too hot, and for me to want to move. So what I've done, and I've shown this in a video, but I have 2 trivets. And so I gently raise one side, put a trivet underneath, and then I gently raise the other side and put a trivet underneath, and that stops it from boiling. And then what I do is, of course, turn down the heat, like shut the stove down some, and with dampers and stuff. And then I take like warm, not cold water, but like warm water, and kind of decrease the water temperature a little bit, just because otherwise it would just keep cooking and boiling and stuff. But it's a bit more difficult, but it's doable. Pressure canning on the wood stove, is the first time I actually saw the metal turn color on my chimney.
What?
You got to get a pretty good fire going. So I don't tend to try that more really.
Wow.
Although with my new stove, it has the what are those called? But you know, the circles you can remove off the stove. So it's a part of the stove top,
Like,
and you remove
you mean
it.
like
the
the
old ones
propane
used to
stove?
have.
Like the...
No, the wood cook stove that I have now has like these circles you can remove to see the fire below.
See.
And
Yes.
if you have that, then you can more easily because the fire's able to get to the pot easier. You get a higher heat to the pot rather than having it go through the top of the stove. But
so what did you do when that? Did you abandon your canning when that went?
I did.
I think
it was so all over the place. I was like, I don't think I pressure canned on the wood cook stove ever
After
since that.
Ooh.
I've done propane. I might try it again in the future with my new stove. But it's going to be like if neighbors come by, I'm going to have to say, I'm sorry. I'm busy. Because, you know, you put a lot of effort into prep work and stuff like that. But I just put them in the fridge.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a total loss.
Yeah, that's good.
You know, but I didn't want to trust them on the shelf after that experience, after that roller coaster ride. And I was trying to see if I could keep it from caramelizing. So twice no.
It's corn now, eh?
So now I just freeze corn.
Yeah.
But I really think it's got to do with if we had dial weight, I mean, it would be a lot less pressure.
Yeah.
So I think that would make a huge difference to the corn. I don't know. I tried different varieties. I don't know.
No luck with the corn.
I wanted corn canned. I really did. Bothers me.
Corn is hard enough to grow. You don't really want to mess it up in the canning method. Like,
well, the thing
it's
is,
difficult to grow
being
up
off
here.
grid, it was a great solution, right? It seemed like a great solution because I don't have a lot of, I mean, I have a freezer, but I don't, you know, I'd rather not have to use a freezer all. Oh yeah, there she is. Okay, so no, I actually have the other one. I like it better, and so does Larissa. There's a different one that has a wooden handle that's black.
Well, she's just finding the
different
Amish
page.
canner on the website to
Go
put
to
the link
second
up for
page
you.
and see, maybe. Try again. That one.
Okay.
That one's mine, and it's more sturdy than the other one. Plus, the handle is better. It doesn't dig into you so much. I really like it. Did I say 250 and it's like 270 or something? I might have.
It could have went up. You know?
It could have. I don't know. I bought mine a while ago. It is $279.99. Sorry, guys. But still, it's no 900.
Yeah.
So.
But you can. I mean, that'll
that's,
save you a lot of time.
That's the best price I've seen in Canada.
Now the only thing is,
let me know if I'm wrong, but
I'm not sure if that's American.
This is
though.
Canadian. This is in Elmira or Drayton, somewhere down there.
Okay. I'm gonna just make sure first.
Yeah.
Sure.
And they are fantastic. I have ordered things from them before, and they are so fantastic at that store.
Okay.
They are, and they ship really fast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They have a lot of really neat kitchen tools in their catalogs and website.
And just as people, they are so good. Like, they'll check into your things. I remember my mom wanted something once that you couldn't get in Canada. And he was like, yeah, you know what? I could bring that in. So
that's really good.
But then he was like, you know, just so you know, it might not be worth it to you. And so he was even realistic that way. Like, he said, well, here's how much it's going to be. I'll give you a quote. And fantastic company.
Now, another viewer just is asking how many jars can be done at one time
in the canner.
I can't remember. I think it says on
perhaps,
the website.
Just like in general of like different canning options.
Yeah, you know what? Off the top of my head, so I know I've done. I'm trying to think how many I've done in there. I want to say I've done 18 pints across the bottom, and then you can do more than one layer.
And that's 40.
In the Amish canner.
In the Amish canner. In the
water
regular,
bathing.
Water bathing. In the regular canner, like how many does yours hold? I want to say 7
Yeah,
quarts.
I want to say 7 quarts as well. And I can only
9 pints, maybe? I think mine holds 9, and mine's a Miro. And then as for the All-American, you can go up with layers. Can yours, I guess if you were doing like pints, you could go up.
Mm-hmm.
So you could do like 18.
I think it's
Probably.
9. Yeah, I think it's 18.
And then with mine, you know what? That is a great question. I'm bad.
It can make a
I'm not
difference
always
on whatever canner you're buying, right?
doing the same amounts.
I find though, like I just have an electric stove, and I'm hoping one day I think I want to turn it over to like a propane stove, because it's actually like ruining my stove. Just the weight when you're doing your pressure can is a lot. Even the water bath can, because if you need to be so far over, I think it's like 1.5 inches over your jars when you're water bath canning, that's a lot of water. And then your jars of food, that's a lot of weight on your electric.
It is, and something like this would be very heavy as well.
Yeah, like I could never can with that on my stove, right? So,
okay, so
definitely if canning's something you want to get into, I know a lot of people have a separate stove to can outside with and things, but I definitely want to go with propane just to have those like really sturdy grills and stuff on the top.
So the All-American 941 model, so there's different models for different sizes. The 941 holds 32 pint jars or 19 quart jars. And now they're talking layers there.
Nice.
So yeah, it's a good one, but it's
yours
a
is
heavy
much
one.
taller than mine.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. And I'm trying to think, I think the 41 is the max. Let me just go back and look. Oh, didn't mean to do that. All right. There's internet. I am not tech savvy. I'm sorry. It's my off-grid life. There's a 930 and then there's a 9. I'm trying to think of what the other one was. But they would all hold different amounts because it's height. It's not necessarily like a width thing as much, I don't think. But the heights change. So it's how many layers. And it's not going to be so much for the pints, but for the quarts. You wouldn't be able to, in all of them, put 2 layers of quarts.
Yes.
So
I hope that answers your question.
And as for the other one, I should look that up on Living Waters and see how many. I want to say I've done. I know when I was doing jam jars, I did like 24 of the half pints at one go, and that was just 1 layer.
1 layer. So
yeah, so it's just sorry to interrupt. So the canner that you had, like that square looking one, it says it can hold up to 15 1-liter jars. Is that what you had mentioned?
Yeah. Okay. 15 1-liter jars. And how many pints? It doesn't say. It's 15, a lot.
15 1-liters is a lot.
If you get 1 liter, 15, you can get quite a bit.
I really like it because I can do it all at once. So you're not waiting for the water to come. You know, you got to wait for it to come up to temp. You're canning. You got to wait. You know, take them out, and then this way, it's instead of like multiple batches, it's 1 batch and it's done.
It's done. That's perfect.
And it's an investment because I have used it plenty and it's still going. And you know, it's something. I mean, you can work without it. You don't have to have it if you can't.
We have one of those other ones. Where is that? In the kitchen, I suppose.
Oh, the black one. Yes,
it's
in the kitchen. Yeah, I don't like those ones. So these are our hate. We have a hate on for these things.
Like I have a much larger one that's taller, but
I just brought the shorter one because it's the same principle behind it that I don't like.
Yeah.
So I used these. I did use them, you know, in the beginning.
Oh yeah.
But I just found that this thing, I don't know who invented this. They have, I hope they've come up with something better now, but you're supposed to put it here and then you're supposed to put your jars on. And I wish we could show, maybe we can show this like this, but you put your jar on and it's moving around and you're not supposed to tip your jars, right? Because they're not sealed yet. And then you go to put it down and they all want to fall over.
Fall in the middle.
And then you got to be able to close this to get the lid shut. So you got to be able to close it at least that much. So I find I'm like rearranging the jar to make it go over top. I've actually bent the thing somewhat just so that it would go over top of things better. I've given up on that.
Not only that, like try having it boiling water in your hot jars and trying to get it out without tipping your jars. And it's
I don't
the
like
Amish
it.
canner is way better. I don't have one. It's something I'd like to have one day.
I probably should have
But
brought it. Yeah.
it's okay.
But it's really nice. I do have videos on my website if you want to look and see what it's like and see me canning in it and how many jars and stuff. You can check it out. What was I going to say? So instead, what do we do? Instead of using that contraption with our...
I don't know. What do we do?
I don't know. So instead of using that, I use my pressure.
Yes. So I'm like, where's she going with this?
But
I don't know.
close it like it's a pressure canner.
That's
so
right.
Just the lid on loosely.
Yeah.
And I actually have a pressure canner that I've had to retire as a pressure canner. And so I use it if I'm not using the Amish canner, if I don't have enough jars to make it worthwhile to fill up that amount of water, then I just use my pressure canner and put the lid on loosely.
It's
and
true.
often, actually, I think in videos I've used it and people thought I was pressure canning. So that wasn't so good. But
yeah.
So I have a viewer asking about it mentioning it holds 15 1-liter jars. Is that on one level or?
Yes.
Yeah, one level.
So that's going to be total 2 though, because I don't think it's tall enough to do, no, it's not tall enough to do 2 levels. But for your pints, you can do multiple levels. And for your half pints, you can do multiple levels. So yeah, so that would probably be the max out for quarts.
Yeah, and I never use those black ones anymore. Ever.
No.
Like I always use my pressure canner, like you said. And
I have
do
a
my water
collection
bath
of
that
them,
way.
unfortunately, if anybody wants some.
Yeah.
You can have them for free.
They're not fun to use. I don't enjoy them, but
So can we show what the other option is? If we're using the pressure canner, we have the rack in the bottom.
oh yeah.
And then we have a jar lifter. And it's so much nicer. It really is.
Yeah.
And you don't have to have, even if you're not pressure canning yet, you don't have to have a pressure canner to avoid using those. If you have a tall stock pot, or as long as it's, taller than your jars, whatever your jar size is, you only need a couple inches above the top of your jar. And whatever pot it is that's taller than that, you can water bath can in that. So it doesn't have to be anything special, but you will have to consider something to put in the bottom of the pot. You always want the jars to be up off the bottom of the pot. So that's the purpose of this thing, is that it's bringing the jars up so that when it's boiling,
it's not like touching the bottom.
Yeah. So if you use a regular stock pot, which is possible, you'll have to invest in these, which you can buy online.
Yeah, I've got them. They're not as strong as the ones that come with the pressure canner, but this is for multiple layers. If you're doing pressure canning with these, or water bath canning, but
Something we could address about pressure canning is, do you want the water to cover the jars? Because with hot water bathing, you want the water to cover the jars by 1 inch or 2. But with pressure canning, I'll give an example. I was doing some pints, I think it was. And so I put in my 2 to 3 inches. I put in all my pints, and then the water was coming up on my jars, because they tell you first thing you do is to put the water in your pressure canner. Then you're putting your jars in. If it comes up too high, past the shoulder, I think they say, then you want to scoop some of that water out. You do not want it to be covering your jar or almost covering your jar. It's not going to be pressure canning that way properly anymore. Because now you're kind of hot water bathing.
yeah.
Anyways, so yeah, so that's something to keep in mind. Before you pressure can, you have a bit of a safety checklist. And so you want to check your gasket, make sure it's flexible,
which is this.
So you can take it out, and you want to make sure it's still flexible. You want to examine it, make sure it doesn't have like cracks and stuff like that. And then you put it back. Oh, and it's good to clean it in between, which I haven't always been really good at, but it is good to clean it in between. And then you want to check your hole. Oh, you want to check to make sure this is good.
So that's this thing here.
That's your basically your safety lock.
It's one, yeah. One of them. There's many.
Yeah. And then you want to look through here and see light. You want to know it's not clogged.
So that would be this here. This is your vent. This is where you're going to be putting your weighted gauge as well. So you want to be able to look through and see. Make sure it's clean before you use it.
Yeah. If it gets clogged, like, you know, it shouldn't get clogged. If none of your jars broke the last time you used it, it really should never get clogged, but you should always check. And if it did get clogged, what would happen is the pressure would go up too high. And then this little guy, the safety gasket, would go. And then you would have steam going, and it wouldn't be good. The other thing we wanted to address is safety-wise. I was just talking to Kendra about this. I'd never thought about it before. Now, this company had it well thought out. So when the gauge is facing you, the safety, what do you want to call that? Plug. Maybe.
Plug. It's plug.
Safety plug. We'll call it a safety plug.
It is a plug. Yes.
It is facing away from you. So if you were at the stove, you would be over here, and this would be over here. And if it ever did have a problem and it had to vent pressure, release pressure, it wouldn't be having steam coming at you, or if a jar broke inside, you wouldn't have any of those contents coming out the top at you. I really enjoyed, I'm trying to think, I always say this wrong. I think it's Rose Red Homestead. It's either Rose Red or Red Rose, but I'm pretty sure it's Rose Red. And I really enjoyed her because she goes through things really she has a very scientific mind. She's a teacher. And she was saying, you know, what happens if it does? What happens if the bad happens and that plug goes, you reached over pressure, maybe you weren't watching the gauge, you weren't listening to the jiggler, it got too high, something happened, or your thing was plugged and you weren't paying attention to that. She's like, you should have a plan. And I never thought about that before, but it is good to have a plan that you don't panic. And so she was like, you know, if you have an electric stove, you would be having to reach over to turn it off, and you would put yourself in harm's way. Yeah. You could get burned by steam, or if there's stuff coming out, you might get burned when it comes down. And so she's like, you should find out ahead of time which fuse in your breaker panel is for the stove, and you could just go turn it off. And in my case, it's propane. I could go outside and turn off my propane, or wherever you have your propane shut off. And if it's natural gas, you know, but to think of these things ahead of time, your scenario, whatever fits for you. And the other thing is, like, say I was doing it on my wood cook stove.
Oh, yeah.
Can't turn that off very easy, can you?
No.
She said, don't panic, because it will stop. Even though you're not turning off the heat, the pressure is going to release, and then you're just left with a pot on the stove that's boiling. So, you know, I thought, you know, that is good to put in your mind, so you're not going to hurt yourself or put your panic or, you know, end up in harm's way. Just to leave the room for a few minutes if you need to. Yeah. Come back and clean the mess later.
That's definitely good information.
So I thought that was really great. She did a video on it, and it was very good. I can't remember what the video is called. I think I sent a link, but anyways, yeah. So it was very good.
So we have I enjoyed someone that has a question. Sorry.
Yes.
Buttercup and Fern Homestead is asking, curious, why would you have to retire a pressure canner?
Good question. So occasionally, it's not the gasket that's the problem. Occasionally, over time, like this pressure canner, the Myro, was my husband's grandfather's canner. So it was used for many, many years. And the best that I can, and actually Rose Red Homestead, she actually had a Myro she had to retire as well. So it might be a Myro thing of the older models. But they're aluminum and they can get dings. And if it's not meeting, if the lid is not securely tight, the steam was escaping on mine on the back side, it was one side anyways. It wasn't everywhere. It was just in one spot. And I could not get it to work right after. So my gasket seems fine. Everything else seems fine. So I think it must just be like minuscule parts where it's just not closing properly anymore.
Good question.
But I mean, it's really old, really, really old. It's served really well for a lot of years.
And there's Dave Knight just had a tip: wear body armor.
It'd be really warm wearing body armor doing canning.
So somebody said their husband, was it in a comment on that one video somewhere? I think it was in a comment on that video. She said her husband wrapped himself in some towels and went over and quickly turned it off or whatever. But she said she was glad he was there because he was like her knight in shining armor. He was just not panicked at all and took care of things. But yeah, I have a friend who said she had a bean jar go, and then it was like bean stuff.
Oh, wow.
But I have never had a problem. And people that have canned for like, 50 years or whatever, they've never had a problem. So it's just a kind of just in case, right? It's good to think about things just in case, but you're probably not going to have a problem. I don't want to sit and make anybody too afraid.
No, it's really not. It's not as scary. Like,
I'll give you an example now, the safety.
Yeah.
So not only does my big all-American canner have all these, it also has where when you turn it, it's also, I don't know, I hope that's in focus, but it also has this clamp that goes underneath. So as long as it's turned and these are up, that lid's not coming off.
Yeah.
That is not coming off. So
and the Presto, like it's the same kind, like it's got two kind of locks as well.
Even the Myro, which was an old canner.
Making noise.
I'm not saying the new Myros. I'm just saying this was an old one, and the safety lock was up inside the handle.
Oh,
and even that, I mean, there's always a nice.
Yeah. So you've
lock.
got this one here, like we mentioned here. This here is a lock, so it's gonna. Where is it? Right here. I don't know if you can see that or not. Yeah, right here. This valve will pop up and it'll actually lock into that little spot that I just showed you. So it's going to lock into place here, but you also have, let's see if I can actually do this because it gets lined up pretty good. And then it also has a second lock. So this is your first lock. And then once the valve pops up, you have a second lock as well. So it's not going anywhere once it's going in shut.
No, exactly. Things have come a long way.
Yeah, they have.
And I'm glad because I feel, but I was never intimidated about that part because by the time I had gotten, I was intimidated to can at first, but by the time I had gotten to pressure canning, I wasn't so scared anymore. And I wasn't really intimidated about it being like a bomb that's going to go off or anything like that. I was more intimidated about my skills. I was intimidated that I wasn't going to know how the jiggling was. It wasn't going to be safe, but it was never really a worry about the canner being a problem.
I think that was one of my biggest things is you followed the rules and you did everything you could, but like, how do you know you still want to eat that? Like that is, I think, some of it too, right? Is like, do we really know I did it right? And so getting over that fear is another step when you start canning. But I don't know. Like I think a lot of people have that fear.
With high acid food, it's so much easier because you're going to have visuals and you're going to have smells, and it's going to smell off, or it's going to have mold, or it's going to, And I remember hearing people say, oh, well, if jam, for example, jam, if there's mold on top, just scoop that part off, scoop a decent amount off and you can eat the rest.
Or maple syrup or anything like that. Yeah.
Yeah. When we do maple syrup, my husband would just say, scoop it off. But I reboil. So that is what is advisable because mold will bring the pH down. So now you don't have a high acid food anymore. It can actually, I'm not saying it does every time, but it can bring the pH down. So now you're getting a lower acid food than you had when you stuck it in the jar. So the rest of that food might be gone as well. Plus mold is can be throughout things, even though it's not visible.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but high acid, there's science. Low acid, there's not always signs.
Yeah.
There is
smell.
sometimes.
Sometimes there is. Yeah.
I remember, I won't say who, somebody shared with me that they used to puree pumpkin, and I'm like, I don't want to not say who either, because I don't want the wrong person to think, because more than one person has done this. But they pureed pumpkin and then hot water bathed it, and they exploded. Like, not like, yeah, but they exploded. Yeah, they came unsealed and they oozed and they were nasty.
Yeah.
So don't do that. I'm trying to get brave now to like doing pumpkin the proper way. I really want it for pie. I want to just dice it up and do it the right way. It's not that hard to blend it up. You got to blend the rest of your ingredients anyways, right? You're mixing it up anyways when you're making a pie. So I think that's fun. I'm going to do that.
So I think, like Pam was sharing with me earlier, is just some information, because she loves to learn and know exactly how everything works. She had these resources that she found on looking at like acidities. Is that the right word?
Yeah, acidities,
levels in certain foods,
temperatures, times, stuff like that.
So I think maybe, I don't know if you would mind covering
good.
some of that.
Do we have a link on your?
We have a couple links for my husband. I want to thank Jason. He's over there working the computer as usual.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure that out myself.
I think that's the one, right?
That is the one.
That is the one.
All right.
So we're just going to share this,
because I've been looking at a bunch.
I don't know if you can screen share it or not.
I like to understand why I'm doing something, not just follow rules. Because I feel like if you understand why you're doing something, then you're more apt to follow those rules as well, and to know which ones you can leave.
Because oftentimes, like, I've heard a lot of people that just go ahead and when they get into canning, they just throw anything into a jar, soup, spaghetti sauce, whatever, and they can it and they think it's good, but really they're not understanding the
They think
acidity.
as long as there's a vacuum that you're
good.
okay. You know, and that's not the case.
Okay, so Jason's got it up there for us.
Like, you can have a vacuum long before you ever can your stuff at all. You can put hot stuff in a jar and have a vacuum.
So I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that. I don't know if you want to go down a little bit. Is that where you?
So that's an acid that checks the pH, and it's showing different pHs of different fruits and things that are safe for water bath. And then if you go down further, it shows tomatoes. Now, this is something that's been a subject between a few different friends and myself. Kendra and I are pretty much on the same page with this one. We always add lemon juice or citric acid to our tomatoes.
Yeah.
But this is showing that there is different acidity for tomatoes. So they have on the left, I believe it's just a slicing tomato. And then on the right, it's aroma type tomato. And it's really fine and really small. Let's see, do they give, oh yeah. So it's 4.35 for the Roma and 4.14 for the slicer. So it shows that it varies. But I was saying to Kendra, aroma is not that sweet. Like, if you, I know, like myself, sometimes I've thrown cherry tomatoes in with things, or you have those really sweet, yummy orange and yellow varieties, or the pink varieties.
Oh yeah, some of them are quite sweet.
And 4.6 is the cutoff. So at 4.35, you're not that far. So if you got even sweeter than aroma, I would like to test it and see with some of my tomatoes what they ended up being. I have pH strips that I check when I'm doing some recipes of high acid stuff. And this would be nice. I have to admit, I'd like to get one of those because it's very accurate. You don't have to guess holding the pH strip and wondering.
Are we done with that slide there?
Yeah. And then later on down further, this is a really good read. This whole article is really good, but it shows why. So people want to make their own recipes. I even have wanted to make my own recipes. I mean, being vegetarian, vegan, well, not quite vegan, but there's a lot of recipes for beef and chicken and fish and various things, but there's not a lot of just recipes for me.
Yeah.
And so I've been tempted. And then the thing is that there's a lot of research that goes into these recipes. So for example, on that website, it shows how they have little,
I don't know if we have
what are they
that, do we?
called?
Do we have that on that
Let's
page?
see. They are called, what
I think it might be a different page.
Log Master High Temp 140 stainless steel loggers. Anyways, you put them in, they're about like yay big. The ones you can get online anyways. And they're really expensive. It's not something everybody's going to want to get. But when they test recipes for pressure canning,
I don't think I have
they put multiples of those in the jars and in every jar in the canner. And then they're checking the temperature for cold, like the jar for cold spots. And they're making sure that all those cold spots heat up adequately for the adequate amount of time to the right temperature, all of that at different altitudes. And they do multiple batches. Like I think I read like 12 to 24 batches. And then I think they redo that. So they're really not fooling around. When they make a recipe and they say it's safe, it's well tested. It's well tested. And if you're not doing that, you know, just...
So it's actually these ones here.
I mean, there's different ones. So that's probably...
I'm just looking.
It's probably fine too.
Thermo, it's
ThermoWorks, but they're called,
thermoworks.com.
So Rose Red Homestead, again, she gets into the scientific. So she actually bought one and she actually did this with some of her recipes. And so she shows it. And she shows a graph. So it takes every minute, I think it is. It logs that information of the temperature. So you can really see the rise in the temperature and the drop in the temperature. And she did it because she wanted to show how important it was not to cool your canner afterwards.
Here, actually, Jay has it. He can maybe put it up. And then we'll just give it a minute because I think we have that, what you're talking about over there too. We can share it as well.
Yeah, so it was with different foods.
Okay.
It was different... So let's see.
So this is what she was talking about here.
Yeah. So they put multiples in the jars and they log the temperatures. So as you're in a recipe, they're going from you putting hot food. If the recipe says you have to put hot food in, they're taking that into account. So they're taking from the food being already heated and the water being a certain temperature, and then they're going up. And they're basically your time for, they think about your time for venting. Like Kendra and I were saying, to the jiggle, it's sometimes like, what, 40 minutes?
Yeah, it can be.
So that's already 40 minutes of that temperature rising in there, the food's getting hot, all of that. And then in the cool down, they take that into consideration as well. So if you're rapid cooling your pressure canner to get it to open faster and release the pressure so you can get on with your next batch or whatever, you might be tired and want to go to bed, they actually accounted for that in the recipe, that it was going to take so long to come down. And if you don't, you're not actually going to end up with a safe product. So she was showing on her
website
video, the fact that the 20 minutes that was required, some of it was after you shut off the burner. So it's still timing, right? So yeah, I don't know if that made sense. I hope it did. There's a lot you can learn from some of these different sites, and different foods, different thicknesses. It takes longer for it to get to the center. You know, they were showing with pickles and pickled carrots. I think one of the things we might have a chance to put up, but it showed how they did pickles, pickled carrots, applesauce, and jam. And with the applesauce, I think it was the applesauce took the longest to get up, but then it was also dropping. So it showed like when they turned off the burner, it was still at that right temperature for a while before it dropped. So, you know.
So if you go to the Rose Red, I don't know if it's on the exact.
I don't know if it was on hers, that one that showed it. It was on a different one. I'm trying to think of which one it was on. It might have been on the log. Let me see. Let me take a minute.
So it just shows a graph. It can really visualize it for you what she's actually talking about. But
it's actually just further
it
down
is
on the one. So the other one we were looking at with the tomatoes and the acidity.
Oh, he's got it there. There you go.
Yeah, it's just further down on the page. And she actually took I'm saying she because I'm a girl. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know if it was a guy or girl who did this article. But they actually interviewed people that test some of these recipes. And so they went and quoted, what they do and how they come to those conclusions. So I really found that too. The Thermal blog is really good. Yeah, so here you can see carrots. This blue line is where they shut it off and took them out. So that's pretty incredible that most of the retaining of in the carrots, it was quick and it was actually before the blue line. And applesauce, look at that, it really peaked after and then went down very, very, very slowly. So they're taking those recipes are taking that into account because they've tested those things, right? So they're making sure. So if you're trying to cool things quickly or you put it in a draft or, whatever, various things.
Yeah, it's going to
pickles was very interesting. Again, that dropped really quickly, but that's because thicker things took longer to cool off, right? But it's just amazing. They actually got hotter after you turned them off. So. Yeah,
so a lot
that
goes into
was really good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading their site. Yeah,
it goes a little over my head, but it shows you that
what started me down this rabbit hole was the want to do. I was like everybody else. I wanted to make my own recipes. You can't blame me. So I was like, well, what do you need to know? How hard can it be, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then I saw on Rose Red Homestead, I saw, she had the little thing and I'm like, oh, I could just get one of those. Okay. And then I realized that it's even more complicated than that, but that is a good start, at least to either have a pH tester or to have that as a start. But when it's high acid, the other thing was, I like making things with natural sweeteners. And I came across, it's the lady that does the Meals in Jars cookbooks and stuff. I'm trying to think of her name. But anyways, she has a cookbook for natural sweeteners. And I wanted to make apple butter with date to sweeten it. And I was looking everywhere on the internet and they're like, no, there's no safe recipe for that. There's no safe times, blah, 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 because of the pH. And I'm like, well, how do they check the pH, right? So I got some pH papers and I was checking things. But anyways, I came across her book and it's really good. And I'm going to have to figure out what it is. But she does that. She has a recipe and she just adds some lemon juice to make it more acidic, right? So she has tested and tried this. But the problem is you can find a lot of recipes out there that aren't properly tested and tried.
And there's not really a way of knowing.
Yeah.
When you're on there searching.
And the other thing is I was on Amazon and I was looking for the USDA cookbook. Yeah, it's a book. It's a cookbook, but it also gives all their guidelines and stuff. And they printed it in 2015. There's a 2020 updated copy on there. And people are saying that it was printed in China and that it's not actually accurate and that there's things changed and missing and that it's not actually very good. So it's coming off as coming from the national. Yeah. So be careful when you're buying books to do with canning.
So we just have another question here. So is it okay to make your own soup, for an example, and pressure can them for the item that it requires the longest time, like canning for the timing for meat that is within the soup, like 85 minutes or so?
So there is actually a recipe that you can play with. I'm trying to think where they have it. I think I sent it, but I don't remember which one it was. I will look. Onion soup, USDA. Aha. It's called the ingredients to use in the USDA free range soup. It's called a free range soup.
I think that is over there. I think he's got it. It's Healthycanning.com. Do you have it over there?
Yes.
So she's
Yeah.
copying. She's kind of blogging on this, but the USDA has a recipe that you can kind of, as long as the ingredients in the soup are all ingredients that they have okayed, so you're not putting noodles or rice or I'm trying to think. They don't like zucchini, I think, either. Flour, yes. As long as they're all, you know, ingredients that they have okayed before, like carrots and potatoes, etc., beans, whatever. Their rule is half and half. So the ingredients, the solids are half, no more than half, and then the liquids are half. And then they give you some freedom, but they do have guidance. So I'm trying to think of where this person's blogging on it, but I don't know if I found it on the USDA website. But it's called USDA's Your Choice Soup Recipe on this blog. And I think, did you put it up or are you going to put it up?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, you can kind of do that. You can kind of do your own thing a little bit, which is what I wanted, because my soups aren't going to, they're not going to have beef in them, right? I want to have like lentils and carrots and potatoes and whatever, you know? So
that's a good resource for sure.
yeah. It's nice to be able to come. That was my question, was like, well, if I go with the longest time, say for beans, if I have beans in it, it's 90 minutes. So if I go with most things, I don't think it goes past 90 minutes. Tell me if I'm wrong, if anything goes past 90 minutes. But I'm just looking at this one. I'm like, what is the time for this one? For the soup. 75 minutes. 100 minutes. Okay, so if you have fish or seafood, you're at 100 minutes. But I think most things are 90 minutes, so at the max. So that was my thought, was like, well, couldn't I just do it for 90 minutes? And I think in general, that's kind of what they're getting at, that as long as your ingredients are okay to be pressure canned, but they want the half and half. So they don't want it a thick. It's the thickness. They want the heat to really penetrate to the center. So they want it to be half solids, half liquids.
And if you wanted to add your noodles or something, you could do so after. Like you take it out, put it in your pot, boil, like cook it, and put your noodles in after when you're going to eat it, not while it's sitting.
I would imagine the noodles would get quite mushy as
Oh,
well.
yeah.
Well, yeah, and they're going to be starchy, and it's going to change the consistency.
Yeah.
And what it really comes down to in a lot of cases is they haven't tested everything, you know, and so until they do, they're only allowing us to use what's safe. So it's unfortunate. I'm like, let's put some funding into testing already. But, you know, this is all USDA, and, you know, what's Canada? What's Canada doing here?
I think Canada has some different guidelines as far as, because I've had people ask that before, but they're a little different than the USDA. Not to say that that's necessarily what I'm going to go by, but
interesting.
They are different.
I haven't seen a whole lot of Canadian
There's a little
stuff.
bit of stuff out there I've come across, but I don't know enough about it, so I won't share.
All right. I'm trying to think what we haven't
I think we covered a lot of stuff. One thing, we have kind of hard water here. And so I would often, when I'm doing my jars and taking them out, I'd have like a white film around my jars. And I'm like, what is that? Is it like some sort of mold? Like it just was very cloudy jars. So Pam actually told me that if I add a little bit of vinegar,
don't want to add too much, because then you get rusting on the
just
rings,
to the water,
to the water you're hot water bathing or whatever. Yeah,
and it did work.
Yeah,
I didn't have any
so interestingly enough, in my old house I would get that, and in my new house I don't.
Wow.
So from one well to the next. But
it could perhaps be old piping where the water is.
I have no idea, but it helps. So if you don't want that, and it is nice. And one other thing that I should mention, because I didn't really have a need for it for years, but when we started storing our jars in a root cellar, that's more damp environment, we started to get mold on jars that looked like they were clean when I put them down there. So now I've made a habit of wiping them with water and vinegar before putting them away. So if I was done canning and it has sat overnight and it's done its time and I've checked the lids and they're all sealed, I would take my rings off, which I was never taught to do. My mom never did that. But the reason you want to do that is because they can, well, I don't know if you've ever heard it, but empty jars even, if you have a case and it's sitting somewhere and the temperature fluctuates and the seal will go up and down, right?
Yeah.
So same principle that if you have a tight lid, they may have unsealed at one point and they may have resealed and you had no idea and they became unsafe. But if you had no ring on or your ring was loose, that they would have spilled out and you would have had visible, you would have known that it had happened. So what I do is now I'll take the rings off, wipe everything down with the vinegar and water, let it dry, and then pack them away. And that's the way we've done it now.
And is that kind of new or not new? Angie was actually the first one who taught me about that or told me about that a few years back, I think. I never heard of that before.
I don't know if I don't know how I heard about that. I don't remember. It's been a few years though. Yeah. Yeah, no, I can't remember. But so it must have been around for a bit. The whole idea to add a little vinegar to the water.
Yeah. So I hope we covered a lot of stuff. I think we covered.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Anything we haven't thought of that we might know? We don't know everything.
We can't promise. No.
It's been a journey. I think some of the first things that we could talk about, some of the first things we canned if nobody had a question, but I think I canned jam. I made homemade pectin in the beginning, like a liquid pectin out of like sour apples. And then, like you said, spaghetti sauce was your first. And I'm like, you're a brave woman.
I was just didn't know any different. You know, I didn't know the difference.
That I did like probably peaches and pears and tomatoes and stuff like that. Like just tomato, not with any vegetables or anything added. But those are probably some of the first things I canned.
The easier things, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. It's a great experience. You know, when you're done, it's a good feeling.
Yeah.
You know, to have done it yourself.
Especially when you can grow things yourself. Like I was so like, you're not supposed to be like, you know, necessarily proud and all this, but I can tell you, I was very proud of myself that day. But we grew raspberries in our backyard and we got like 48 half pints of jam just from the backyard. Amazing. I'm like, I was so happy. I was like, wow, this all came from our backyard. And it's a good feeling to know that you can do that, you know, and just have it for as long as it's good for. And then I love raspberries because they grow back every year, you know, like
And for me, I always loved pear sauce, but really babies only get pear sauce. I don't know why they're so advantaged, but it's not something you can buy, you know.
You can't, no.
So, I mean, unless you want, I used to eat the baby pear sauce, but anyway. It's a whole other subject. My mom used to can pear sauce growing up, so I was spoiled, you know. Wow. And I like pear sauce, and so that's a motivator for me. It's something I can't buy from the store necessarily, unless I want to buy it in little jars. And so I like making things like that too. You know, like healthier apple butters.
Oh yeah.
You know, I wouldn't necessarily go. I mean, I'm not saying it's horrible to eat store-bought apple butter, but I don't do well with sugar. That's just me. And so I like making my own because I can sweeten it as much as I want. I can use sweeter apples. I can do it my own way. So those are especially things I like to can, or things that I can't buy from the store. Or my jams, I can put stevia, or I can put concentrated fruit juices to sweeten them, or just honey, less sugar even. Speaking of which, I love Pomona pectin.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Because it opened a whole new world for me. Definitely, because you can use as little or as much as you want. So that's definitely a good product
Sweetener.
To check out.
Is that the stuff I ended up using in making bricks though?
Yes.
Okay.
You just got to follow the directions.
Jason one time tried to make, I don't even know what type of jam it was.
I believe it was strawberry.
Strawberry jam, and we lived in the city, and it was pretty solid. He used Pomona pectin.
So that's one thing I have noticed. Like, you know, I'm not saying the brick side of things, but I have noticed that I make a pear jelly. It's not really pear jelly because jelly's clear, but I call it pear jelly because it's the same consistency. Anyways, I make a pear jelly, and it's pretty thick if I follow the recommendations. So you do have to kind of play around with that a little bit. But no, I make all kinds of things with that. I don't just make, I mean, it's gone into the realm of, because I'm dairy free, so I make cheeses with it. I use it to help solidify cheeses. It's cheaper than agar and some other things.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's good. It's great stuff. I love it. But that's the other thing is like, if I went to the store and I bought like a little stevia jam, it'd be this tiny little jar. I'd be paying probably $6. I think it's even going up. And I can make it for a fraction of the cost. So, yeah. And even applesauces. You know, we made applesauce with our big load of apples.
Oh yeah, Pam got us a good deal on apples. I did.
I couldn't believe how cheap it was for the applesauce to make it that way. So
yeah,
and even pears, canning the pears versus buying them, you can get some really good deals that way.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think that can kind of wrap up tonight's live on canning. Hopefully this was helpful for you guys. Pam did a great job.
No.
Yes, you did.
We make a good team. But I don't know, you know, we're honest. If we don't know, we don't know.
Yeah.
We're still learning lots. And if you guys know things we don't, we want you to speak up. So in the comments, even afterwards, you know, if somebody has answers to things we didn't, please put it in the comments for somebody else. We want just more information going out there. That's all.
We did it to help other people because we do have a lot of people come up to us and ask, and half the time I don't have the answers because I'm still learning as I go. I haven't canned everything and I still make mistakes but
it's hard to have canned everything. It's hard to have canned everything.
I really only canned what I would use and need. Like,
it's true.
I don't, and to be honest, like I've canned potatoes and carrots, and I don't know that I would do it again. You know, like the food, you can get mushy and that's the thing with doing the 15 pounds of pressure. Like you're cooking and cooking and cooking that stuff right down.
Way higher than it actually needs to be, unfortunately.
So there's certain things that are worth canning and other things that, like, you know, well, either we'll do without or we'll just, you know, have to go to the store and buy it fresh. We do have potatoes put away if we can get through the whole winter with them. But there are certain things that I just choose not to can anymore too. And that's okay.
And the canned potatoes are okay for certain things. It's kind of like if you went to the store and you got canned potatoes, you wouldn't use them for everything. And these probably aren't even as hard.
Mine were way softer.
But I do have to say that I've been watching a lot of her lately, but Rose Red, because I trust her. I wouldn't necessarily do this with everyone, but because of how much scientific knowledge she brings, I trust her. And so she did hers the USDA way with the 10 minutes cooking beforehand. And then the next time she just did them for a couple minutes because the whole point is that they're heated through before they go in. And that's how she does hers now. But everybody has to walk that journey on their own. Anyway, but yeah, they do get pretty mushy.
Yeah.
If for mashed potatoes, or if you were, did you try them roasting them afterwards? Because sometimes I'll pre-boil my potatoes and then I'll roast them afterwards, and they turn out pretty good.
I know, like there was some jars they're almost
nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So certain things just aren't. I think because of our altitude and
I think it makes
Canada and the excessive pressure that we have because of that, some things might just be off limits for us. And
I've known someone has told me that they actually just water bath their potatoes and they were nice and not hard, but I'm not willing to do it. So yeah, it's just
So
something
I
we're
would
not
much rather follow what she said
yeah.
and try it that way. I would much rather just make sure that they're heated through
Mhm.
and then put them in and still pressure can them. But that's just me.
Yeah.
See, that's the thing is, you know, we each got to walk our own road. But
you'll learn as you go.
yeah, I would definitely say when you're beginning, err on the side of caution and make sure you're understanding why you're doing things before you start to deviate from what you're doing.
Yeah. That's good.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for coming over, Pam.
Thanks for having me. Thanks for watching us.
Yes.
If you guys weren't here, well, it'd be awfully lonely.
Anyway, so so if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, make sure that you do that on the Plowman's Backyard. And if you are not familiar with Pam's channel on Hidden Blessings Homestead, make sure you go over and subscribe to her too. So we can kind of, like, we generally have videos coming out kind of regularly. Trying to get a little bit more regularly now.
It's been a
but
busy summer for me.
you know, we do anything from, you know, gardening to canning, just homesteading stuff. Pam does a lot of recipes, and she's done a couple of medicinal herb videos.
Yeah, I have more medicinal herbs coming
So,
out. There's lots more videos coming out now that things are slowing down for me. There was a bit of a break there for a while. I kept recording. I just was having a hard time getting the editing and living life. But
yeah,
so
that's a challenge.
Lots of coming out into the winter.
Yeah. All right. Well, have a good night, and thanks for joining.
Take care. God bless.